Yo, what's up guys, I'm Nick from Producer School and welcome back to this brand new video. Today we're diving into the sound of Anyma. This guy probably doesn't need an introduction since he's pioneering the current melodic techno movement around the globe. With his label Afterlife and his solo shows Genesis, he's traveling throughout the world and it has been a massive success so far. In a few days he will be premiering the Sphere as the first electronic dance music artist, so this really shows the levels that he's playing right now. In the past we did a video on his sound, but after many requests to dive into his newly developed sound, I decided it was time to do a brand new video on it today. I'll take you through all the essential elements in his tracks and also explain you how his sound has evolved over the course of the last year. Since the last tutorial he has released 2 albums which have been a massive success, so I'm also going to try to incorporate as much elements from the tracks in there today in this video. The sounds I will be using are all from our melodic techno packs, and if you're interested in checking these out, head over to the link in the description. For now, let's dive into the video. So I already did the sound selection for this to make the video easier, and from there I'm going to build a track in his current style. Basically I want to start with the part that I feel is the main element of basically any melodic techno track, but also his, which is a sub-bass. For this I will be using a bass from our sample pack Voyage, and it's called Bass Arch, which is a really clean rolling sub-bass. The preset itself is pretty simple, but looking at oscillator A is really interesting since we have sampled a Moog saw for this pack, and it just adds a bit of that character that I miss in some wavetables that are like native Serum. So when I solo it, it's not that big of a difference, but it was just a nice addition to the pack. And then a more squarish kind of wave on oscillator B, both pitched down 2 octaves. Then envelope 2 is shaped like this, brought back the sustain a little bit and lowered the decay, which is linked to an MG-Low 24 filter. But make sure you don't open it up too much, as for this one we really want to focus on the sub region, and later on I will add a top bass. I will want to leave some space for all the layers that we're using. Some delay and some reverb with a lot of low cut, and here more of a bend filter, because of course we don't want the low end to be messy, and then a little boost here in the EQ on the low mids, which just adds a bit more punch to the sound. And that's basically it for one of the main elements, so that's pretty straightforward. And let's now head into the piano roll. So in the style of Anyma, basically all the tracks have a rolling 1/16 rhythm, which I already explained in multiple videos as well. So I don't want to spend too much time on it. Pretty straightforward, as it's just like 4 notes, beat right here. And then you can copy it throughout the arrangement. One trick that I tend to use a lot is that I don't let these notes hit each other, but I just keep a little bit of space in between. And this kind of allows the club system to reset its woofer and to make every note have a bit more impact. But these are really just those small changes that can kind of make your mix a lot better really easily. Really straightforward 1/16 rhythm, and then when you play it, it sounds like this. Then for the mixing part, I add 3 different plugins. The first one is a simple EQ to get rid of some of the leaking high frequencies that still pass through the filter. Just make it sound a bit more muffled and to give a bit more focus to the sub area. Then a bit of OTT compressor, 22% depth, and the rest of the settings are just standard. And this just kind of add some character to the sound. Lastly, a really steep sidechain, as you can see right here, which will leave enough room for a kick to punch through, and will also kind of contribute to the overall groove of the track. So with the effects on, that will sound like this. Next up, we want to enhance the groove a little bit with a top bass, and for that I'm using this bass called Strategy, which is also from the Voyage pack. which is a combination of 2 basic mini saw waves, 1 pitch down 2 octaves and 1 pitch down 1 octave. And since this is a top bass, layering different octaves in a sound will just make the sound more full overall, whereas in the previous sound kept it all on the same level just to maintain a consistent sub. But for this, that's not necessary. So basically 2 different octaves to fill up more of the overall frequency spectrum. 2 voices of unison and brought back the detune a little bit, so you get more of a wider bass instead of the mono-focused sub bass. And that just complements each other really well. You can see envelope 2 is shaped like this, so sustain all the way down and decay to 400 milliseconds. And this is linked to an MG Low 18 filter, but for the rest in this oscillator section there's nothing much more going on as well. Then some hyper on it, basically set to 25%, and this just makes the overall sound a bit wider, which is nice for a top bass like this. And a really short slap delay, 1/16 with a mix to 30%. That will give you this very simple but straightforward sound. Also, envelope 2 is linked to the gain of the EQ, which boosts the high slightly every time you hit the note. From here you basically start playing around with adding a counter groove on top of the 1/16 rhythm. I think this will do a job, but we will see how it interacts with the kick and perhaps then we can change it. For this again, EQ with of course the sub cut out, as well as some of the higher frequencies and a boost in the low mid, and a very slight OTT with 8% and another sidechain which is less hard as you can see, and with the mix set to 85%. Then together these basses sound like this. Next up you want to add a very punchy and full kick which complements overall bass, and I'm using the kick from our pack Voyage, which sounds like this. As you can see and hear right here, there's a really clicky attack to it, while the tail of the kick is really full and really deep. This combination just works really well, and it could basically be like more of a progressive house old school kick, but in this genre it really works well. So let's layer that underneath the bass, and then it sounds like this. Immediately gets you into a kind of groove, and the sub bass is really making sure that there is drive, while the top bass is contributing a bit overall groove of the track. And it's really important that these elements sound good because they will be continuously playing throughout basically your whole track. So if that doesn't sound good, it will be hard to make a good track. I think for now it sounds good. Of course we can make some changes once we start adding more different elements. So now we can move on to a next very interesting sound, which is the Anyma gated lead. It's a very interesting patch in Serum, which is from the Voyage pack, and it sounds like this. So basically there are a few elements that make this patch more special than others, which is first of all the gating effect, and next it's the pitch effect. But I will now just dive you through the sound to explain it. First of all, the oscillators are super straightforward, and they're basically just 2 saw waves with 6 and 2 voices of unison respectively. And the real part which makes it interesting is this LFO 1, which is shaped like this. So basically it fills up half of the overall LFO section, and the rate's set to 1/8. And then the LFO is linked to the level of both of the sounds. This creates that stuttery kind of effect, and if I were to bypass this, it would sound like this. So as you can see, that really gives the character to the overall sound, and it's also linked to the noise level and the cutoff, so you really get like that drastic gate effect. Then next up there's LFO 2, which is manipulating the fine tune, which gives you that pitchy kind of effect. It's linked to the fine tune, set to a very extreme position, so I think it's set to 40 or something, yes. And then the rate of this is set to 1 bar. So it starts at the beginning of the bar, then the detune increases to when the bar is like split in half, and then towards the end of the bar, the detune goes back to a normal position again. Then there's one more LFO, which is basically doing the same as LFO 2. Then there's another LFO, which is basically the exact same setting as LFO 2. But this one is set to trigger. So in the sound, the detune effect will only occur once. Then it will go in a static way. But LFO 3 will continuously follow its shape as long as you press a note. And this one is linked to the MGLO 12 filter. So that kind of gets that sweeping effect. Then there is some chorus, some delay, some reverb, and that's basically it. So chorus is more to make the sound a bit more alive and a bit more wide. And the delay and reverb are just to make the sound a bit more bigger and yeah, basically make it sound a bit more wet. And layering this on top of the bass will immediately give you that Anyma style effect. A lot of people ask us how to approach that effect. As you can see, you can even do it inside Serum and it's not that complicated. You could also do it outside of Serum with a volume automation, which would give you a bit more control if you were to layer certain elements. But for now, using one lead is fine. For the effects, I would like to make it really like harsh and in your face. So first of all, a straightforward EQ with a low cut and some boosts in the high mid. Then the OTT to make it a bit more crispy, set to like 20%. Not too crazy as well. Then a really slight decapitator, which just adds that tiny kind of crunch or grit that you want on a sound like this. And then one of my favorite plugins, kind of beefing up certain sounds at the moment, is also a Soundtoys plugin, which is called Little Radiator. And as you can see, the heat is set to like 1 dB with the mix turned down to 4%. This really kind of destroys the sound a little bit further, but in a really nice way. With the effects loaded on top of it, it sounds like this. However, we don't want it to continuously play, so you want to put it into a new pattern and basically copy it this or even shorter. For example, you let it play for 2 bars and then you have room in between to fill. Probably you can already guess what we're going to fill it with, as this is an Anyma style video, and those are his FM bass shots. So I'm placing that over here and I call the pattern bass shot. And let me open up the sound that we're going to use for this. So the sound is a step sound from Voyage and it sounds like this. Really FM-y and metallic kind of sound, and I will now take you through it. So first of all, there is a saw wave, which is basically functioning as the main wavetable. It's set to 6 voices of unison with some detune, really kind of make it wide. And then there's this basic MG wavetable right here, which is only set to 35%. But this is controlling the FM modulation on oscillator A, which is pretty harsh, set to 70%. And if I were to take this down to 0%, it would still be a fat sound, but you would really miss that metallic edge. Then envelope 2 is shaped like this and linked to an MGLO 12 filter, which kind of makes it sound a bit more controlled, instead of like when you open it up, it starts to sound really harsh, and you can definitely automate it or use it. But in this case, we just want a bit more of a controlled sound. And now we just want to come up with a supporting rhythm on the bass notes. Kind of uses fast rhythms a lot. So for example, those 2 notes in the beginning. You can even try even faster, so like let's say 1 step. I think think this is a really good starting point. Again, you want the sound to be more in your face. So here are the effects that I want to put on it, which is first of all an EQ with a pretty steep low cut to make sure it doesn't interfere with the bass. A pretty harsh OTT to kind of squash the sound together. A decapitator with the drive set to 4 and a sidechain set to 60%. And with the effects on, that will sound like this. Now a little trick to get a better result for these bass shots is to take a perk like this, a really noisy, snappy, short perk, and layer it with the bass shot, which will just add a bit of attack to the sound, as you can hear right here. A really subtle difference, but it just adds that kind of extra attack that you sometimes miss. From here I want to double this arrangement a few times, and then let's see. We want to at some point start to add some variation into the sound. So let's make this pattern unique and change up the bass notes a little bit. Also, we don't want to repeat these elements too much, so let's get rid of them right here and then try to add a variation to the bass line, which can be really simple. So you can go down. I know this one always works. I also use that in the track that we released on Siamese. It basically has the same progression, which really gives you that transy feel. You want to make sure that the top bass will also follow this. Kind of adds more emotion to your track, and that's why you also want this in your build-up. It's kind of switch from a really static and hard-hitting sound to a more emotional moment on the dance floor, and then it can switch back to kind of the in-your-face, hard-hitting part right here. So let's move on to the next element, which will be a top lead. And for that, I'm using this lead from our pack Nova, which is called Lead Samsara and is inspired by the Anyma track Samsara. This is a really interesting sound. As you can see right here, it's using 3 oscillators in Diva with different ranges. So this makes the sound really full. So you have one right here, which is just in the standard range. Then one which is 2 ranges up, and one which is 1 range up. So it basically fills out the whole spectrum. And then some noise added to it, which really creates this sound. This is it normally, 3 saw waves in different ranges, and then some noise added. And now we want to create a arpeggiating melody on top of the progression variation that we just created. And it can be really simple, repetitive, but I would just try to come up with something. I think this might even be a melody that he used, but I'm not sure. But I think this will work. Let's see how that works on top of this part. Really well. So since there's already delay and reverb in the synth itself, I just want to add a little EQ with the low cuts carved out. And that's basically it. And a sidechain set to 64%. And from here, we're heading into the last 2 parts of the synth selection, which is adding a synth itself. So basically a pad. And a piano that we can subtly layer with it. So for this, really easily copy the progression of the bass right here. And for the synth, we're just using 2 notes to get that kind of cinematic progression effect right here. So you just copy the notes, pitch it up 1 octave, and then so like this. Sound itself is really nice, and there's some grit on it here with the distortion, which slightly distorts it in a really nice manner. Then we also want to copy that in the piano, and the piano can be filled in with more notes. Something like this, really straightforward. It's just for the background filler basically. And that's basically it for the synth part. So let me now move on to the drums. So the drums in a project like this will be really straightforward, since the synths itself are already kind of filling up a lot of space. So right here I loaded in some drums that really complement this well. So first of all, a driving head loop, which is basically complementing the 1/16th rhythm. For the beginning of the drop, this is basically alright. You want to really have a dry impact with all the focus on the synths. And then from here you can start adding some more heads and claps. So it's already starting to sound like something. And effects, which in this case is mostly white noise based here in the drop. So some ambience, some impacts and some down filters, as well as some sweeps, which sounds like this. Together with the rest, that sounds like this. And from here I will start working out the arrangement a little bit and skip to the part where I finish this and then explain it a little bit further. So I worked on the arrangement and also added one more vital element to this track. And let's start with the extra element that I added, which is a choir vocal that sounds like this. It's basically a choir from our sample pack with a gate effect on it. So as you can see right here, I opened up a gross beat and added a trance gate with the volume mix set to 65%. This creates that stutter effect in the sound. Then some decapitator to add some drive and some vintage verb to make it really wet and wide, as well as some sidechain over here. And if you, for example, play it together with the synths over here, you'll immediately hear that it really makes the track way more atmospheric and big. And I also took this ad-lib from one of our previous sample packs, just fill things up a little bit more. Then for the automations, as you can see, it's mostly filtering and the small, just to kind of gradually transition throughout the arrangement. For the arrangement, it's definitely not spectacular and it can be better, but given the time, I just wanted to keep it simple. So you kind of start with a filtered out intro with the kick, bass and top bass. Then you slowly bring in all the frequencies. And from here you start introducing elements like the lead and the vocal. In the build-up you want to make things really big, and as you can see here I switched up the melody to kind of create even more tension and emotion. Another interesting part about his newer style is that it is way more kind of EDM-ish, which you also hear in the fills that are being used. So right here, this is really like a old school EDM fill, but it is like the way this sound has evolved nowadays. And that's basically it for this project. Since this project is not included in Voyage, I'm going to give away the project to 5 people who leave a comment down below. So if you have something to say or if you have a question, make sure to leave a comment down below. And I will now play you guys the end result. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I tried to kind of do it a bit from scratch and dive as deep as possible into the different elements which is possible in this short time. If you guys have any more questions or suggestions, make sure to leave a comment down below. For now, if you want to check out all the sounds that I used in this project, then head over to the link in the description where you can find our newest melodic techno pack Voyage or some of our older ones. We also have a new bundle deal which kind of bundles up all of our sounds that we made in the past for melodic techno. So this could also be something interesting if you really want to take your sample library to the next level. For now, I want to thank you guys for watching and I see you guys next time.